Welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. Today is Wednesday, April 15th. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here in Jerusalem, joined by Diana Bletter, our reporter in the North and for Science. Diana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Amanda.
It is such a pleasure to see you because the North is being pummeled today by dozens of rocket barrages from Hezbollah. This comes on the heels of talks in Washington, D.C. between the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. and the Lebanese ambassador to the U.S. to try and reach some kind of brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. The goal here is to disarm Hezbollah. So these rockets coming from Hezbollah are in retaliation to the very talks themselves. We are going to discuss what it is like to live in the North, to report from the North, and we're also going to talk about a very moving story of one bereaved mother who is doing all she can to carry on her son's memory. All of this and more when we're back. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our Northern reporter, Diana Bletter. Diana, tell us what it has been like so far for you this morning. Dozens of rockets have been shot from Hezbollah. Have you yourself been hearing any kind of sirens where you live?
Well, Amanda, first I want to say that when you invited me to be on the podcast today, it didn't take more than 2 hours for Hezbollah to start pounding us with rockets. And also this morning, there were sirens and more than 40 rockets were fired into the Western Galilee, where I live, and northern Israel.
Correct. And this is, as I mentioned, in retaliation for these talks that took place yesterday. There was no agreement, of course, that was signed yesterday. But from what we understand, the talks were encouraging and there are plans to continue having talks. But Hezbollah may or may not decide to adhere to these talks, of course. And what are we seeing in terms of the past week since the ceasefire with Iran? How has Hezbollah been acting since this ceasefire took place?
Well, when you said that you wanted me to talk about the ceasefire, I thought, what ceasefire? There is no ceasefire. We're in a war zone. Yesterday was Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, and I went into Nahariya to see what was happening. And when the siren went off at 10 o'clock in commemoration of what happened, people panicked because they thought it was a siren indicating Hezbollah rocket fire. And a woman said to me, there's too many sirens. We can't keep doing this. People didn't know what to do. And I passed by the street where a 43-year-old man, Ori Peretz, was killed at the end of March. He had been helping, from what neighbors said, he was helping a woman with a baby carriage get into the shelter, and he was killed by Hezbollah rocket fire. So it feels very raw, and it's still very fresh. There isn't any ceasefire. Hezbollah, from what we understand, as you said, is deliberately attacking due to the talks that are between Lebanon and Israel that Hezbollah definitely doesn't want any part of.
Right. I want to talk a little bit and give context for our listeners who are outside of Israel. I want people to understand a little bit more what it means to live in the North. And as you know, Diana, I was visiting my son last week, who is now stationed in Sde Nehemiah, which is a kibbutz in the far north. And I, of course, as his mother, have been very worried, nervous, having him there. And I needed to really see firsthand what it was like to live there. And one of the things, it's this push-pull of tranquility, utter paradise, and probably the best place on earth, or arguably at least. And then at the same time, there is this existential danger that could really rain down terror on you at any moment. And so in the midst of, for example, a beautiful wild iris field, right next to that field, there is what we call a migunit, which is basically a cement bunker. And these bunkers are throughout the North. Where you live, do you have these bunkers? And tell us a little bit about living alongside them.
Well, there are those temporary bunkers. There are also these U-shaped bunkers that don't have anything above it. I think it's just to stop shrapnel. But the natural tendency is when there's a siren, I'm curious and I'm a reporter and I look up and I see it looks like a shooting star. It's silver, and then you see the trail of the Iron Dome. So where I would be in the middle of, let's say, riding my bicycle along the shoreline, and then there's a siren, and you have to find some place to duck in, or as you said, by the iris fields. It's a constant sense that anything could happen at any moment. Unlike in many parts of the country, there's still no school for children, so everything is on hold. The streets in Nahariya, which is normally a seaside resort town, are fairly empty. And like you said, there's the juxtaposition of the beauty. When I was driving up to Shtula, which I know we're going to talk about, it's so beautiful. There are woods and there were wildflowers growing, as well as flowers in the hothouses. And I passed cows wandering alongside of the road. And then I reached the roadblock where soldiers are manning to stop people from coming into Shtula. So we can talk about that now if you want.
Sure. And just one more note, there is life in the north. And I think for many who don't live here, or for even many Israelis such as myself who don't necessarily get to the north, it feels as if it is this terrorized danger zone. And it is. But alongside that, there's also life, and you can be at a playground and the babies are half naked, as one does here in Israel, and they're laughing and they're smiling. And at the same time, you are looking around, you're looking for that cement bunker. You want to know where it is because you have 15 seconds, 45 seconds tops to reach safety when a rocket comes through. So I think it's really important for people to understand what life is like here for you, Diana. And when you are out reporting, for example, and you hear a siren, what do you do, Diana?
Well, that's a good question. It depends what I do. If I'm on my scooter, sometimes I don't really hear the siren. But one time I was riding and I felt, why is everybody along the side of the road? For a moment I forget. But one thing that you just mentioned, at the playground near my house, it's a grassy lawn, and parents allow their kids to play there because there is a real bomb shelter there. And I have this image of kids, barefoot kids, when there was a siren running in barefoot to the shelter. That's what life has become. So it's sort of like they're used to it, but they're still trying to play outside and have life go on. So it's a very strange kind of existence right now. It's very surreal.
You mentioned the siren for Yom HaShoah, and that took place yesterday. Next week, we have Yom HaZikaron, so there will be 2 more sirens marking the somber day, Israel's Remembrance Day. And that is followed by Israel's Independence Day. The Remembrance Day bleeds into, and when I say bleeds into, I mean that quite literally, into Independence Day. And this year, Israel is acknowledging what is happening in the north by asking a woman called Ora Hatan, who lives in Shtula, to light one of the torches. The lighting of the torches, there are 12 torches, which represent the 12 tribes of Israel and many other different things as well. And you went up to visit Ora just earlier this week at her restaurant in the very far north. So tell us about, one, getting into Shtula.
Well, as I said, it's beautiful. It's about 22 miles away from my house, so it's not the far north. It's still the Western Galilee. It's right on the northern border with Lebanon, and she lives in a village called Shtula, which her parents were one of the founders. They were from Kurdistan in 1969. October 7th happened, the Hamas-led invasion of southern Israel, and Hezbollah already started firing rockets into northern Israel on October 8th, 2023. 60,000 people were evacuated from northern communities, 32 northern communities. And Ora said that she heard her mother's voice saying, I didn't move from Kurdistan to be a refugee in Israel. And Ora decided to stay in Shtula. Everyone else evacuated except soldiers. There were no more tourists visiting, and she did what her mother did, which was she started cooking for soldiers who were stationed in the area. She has cooked thousands of meals for soldiers, And multitasking doesn't do her justice. She's multitasking. She said that during the war, she decided to go to law school, and she was taking classes on Zoom while rolling kuba, which is a Kurdish dish. So she's incredible. And soldiers, when I was there, they were there was one of the vehicles that passed, and they yelled out the window, "Yalla, Ora Alufa, Ora, you're a champion." They just love her. She's like their mother, and it was very beautiful to see. And that's why she was chosen to light this torch the way her mother did in 2008. She said the only time she was scared since the whole time that she's been there was when there was a direct hit on her restaurant. As you said, it was a few doors down from where she lives. And the only reason she was afraid was because she was scared that gas tanks would explode. But she's been there with her son. And when I was visiting her, there was a lot of military action. There were a lot of booms. Ora didn't have time to flinch. And her son walked with me to the balcony where there was a helicopter that was shooting off flares. And her son, Yair, said to me, "Oh, it's shooting out stuff so that nobody shoots at it." And I thought, oh, he knows a lot because of the war. But he said, no, it's because of the games he plays, which I thought was so cute. It was like a life is beautiful kind of image.
Yeah, wow, I just have chills hearing you talk about that. And just to be clear, Shtula right now is evacuated still?
It isn't evacuated. People have voluntarily chosen to leave. About 20 to 30% of the residents are still there. In the communities north of the border that were evacuated, people returned, and many of them are now living under fire, but they say that they refuse to be evacuated again, that this is their home and they are not leaving despite the dangers. And one thing that they stress, which is very important, is they feel that the constant ceasefires with Hezbollah still does not solve the issue that's been happening since 2006 and before, where there's a ceasefire that's kind of forced upon Israel. Israel stops, and Hezbollah still builds up weapons and tunnels in the area. And they want this time to be a real disarmament, which is probably why Hezbollah is still firing rockets at us.
Right. And that is, of course, the topic of the talks that took place yesterday, the disarmament of Hezbollah. Of course, these talks are being held between Israel and Lebanon in the United States. It is a rare, if not unprecedented, situation in which Israel and Lebanon are speaking directly to each other. But Diana, the soldiers who are stationed outside of Shtula, they're there to guard the community, I would understand, but also to keep looky-loos away from this very dangerous situation?
They are guarding the area, and they are also in southern Lebanon. And in fact, when I was there, one of the soldiers came by to bring back pots that Ora had used to cook the meals. And it turns out this soldier had delivered Ora's homemade meals to soldiers within southern Lebanon on Friday night for Sabbath dinner. And he joked that it was sort of like a Walt delivery in the war. But it is a crazy reality. So yes, the soldiers are right on the border, protecting the northern communities as well as trying to uproot Hezbollah from still many strongholds, as well as continued tunnels that are in the area.
Diana, we're going to go to a short break, and then we're going to discuss an equally impressive woman. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our reporter, Diana Bletter. Diana, you are now going to put on your health and science cap a little bit, and we're going to discuss the fascinating and extremely moving case of Iris Chaim Hussein Yotam was mistakenly killed in Gaza. He was taken hostage on October 7th, 2023 to Gaza, and he and two other hostages who had managed to escape were mistakenly killed by IDF forces when they were trying to reach Israeli hands again. Now, the case of Iris Chaim touches on so many different layers of Israeli fabric, if not Jewish life in general. And Iris has been fighting for all these years to use Yotam's sperm and generate life from this situation through a surrogate. And this week we heard good news for her. So tell us about what's happening in the case right now.
Well, she said that she waited for more than a year, which she said is a short period of time in the Israeli courts, for permission to use her son's sperm. It's called posthumous sperm retrieval. And so far there have been more than 250 cases of mostly parents asking for sperm retrieval of their killed loved ones. And what is fascinating is Israel is the country with the most lenient policies about posthumous sperm retrieval because of our situation, but there is no national policy. So what happens is that when, God forbid, there's a knock on the door about a fallen son, the family is asked if they are asked by the IDF if they want to have this procedure done. But there is a limited period of time, 72 hours, up to 72 hours is the latest. And Professor Bella Savitsky was she's from Ashkelon Academic College, and she got that knock on the door about her son, Yonatan, and she said that it was 48 hours since they even identified his body. And by the time they asked her, it was already too late. And she did a survey about soldiers and how they feel about this. And more than half said that they would support their parents using their sperm if, God forbid, something happened to them. About 30% said that they would be opposed to their partners using the sperm. But what the professor said was that nobody asked the soldiers yet. And now the defense ministry is dealing with this issue. Do they ask soldiers, recruits, what should happen? Should they freeze soldiers' sperm before they go into battle? There are many complicated issues, and also religious issues and ethical issues. And Iris Chaim did get permission, but the judge made clear that it isn't a legal precedent because there is not yet any national policy. In July, Sharon Eisenkot received permission to use her son Maor's sperm, but now there's the process of who do you choose? What happens? Who will raise the child? There are a lot of complicated issues. In June also of last year, a woman whose fiance was killed, she gave birth to the first baby from her fiance's sperm retrieval, and she said that as soon as she heard that he was killed, her second thought was, I want to have his baby.
Right. And she's a doctor, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Correct.
This, a woman who gave birth. Yes, you wrote a fascinating story when that took place. And you mentioned Eisenkot. This is Gadi Eisenkot's wife who received permission. He is, of course, one of the contenders in the upcoming elections whenever they should take place. In any case, Diana, I want to talk a little bit more about the science of this. And the sperm retrieval is not a one-to-one, now you get a baby, meaning they can retrieve the sperm, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the sperm itself will be viable. And then there are all the other stages of creating a viable embryo that can be implanted. And as anyone who has gone through fertility treatments or read about fertility treatments knows, IVF in itself is not a guaranteed success. So what is the actual rate of success, or is it too early to tell in terms of these sperm retrieval operations?
Those are very good questions. It's still a new procedure, basically. Iris actually said that a man who lost his son 20 years ago told her that he wished that there was this procedure available then because he would have done it for his son. So there's a time limit. The clock is ticking right away, and the sperm is then frozen, and it's not always viable, as you said. In Iris's case, she said that what was interesting is that many, not I don't know how many, but several women who were interested in anonymous sperm donations, they approached her saying that they would love to be and honored to be the mother of her grandchild, because they said that unlike in an anonymous sperm donation, the woman would have a whole history, a family, siblings, grandparents, which is very different. And she stressed that whoever raised or got Yotam's sperm would have his heritage of spiritual traditions, and so that was very moving to hear. So it is a science, and as you said, in the case of Hadass Levy, who underwent the IVF for her fiance's sperm, they were very worried that maybe it wouldn't succeed, but they had one more chance and it was successful.
So just to be clear, in the case of Iris Chaim, she is looking to have a surrogate and raise the child on her own, or she is looking to have a woman who will help her raise the child?
She doesn't know yet. She said she wants the family first to make the decisions and then decide if it will be a surrogate or if it will be a woman who wants to have a baby and would like to be part of her family and raise the baby with her. So there are a lot of complicated issues with that. And she said that while in some countries they don't allow any posthumous sperm retrieval because they are honoring the wishes of the dead, she feels that Israel wants to honor the wishes also of the living and stress the idea of creating new life. And that was something that was very important to her. And also she joked or said half seriously that her son said that because he was a red-headed species, which he felt was extinct, he reassured her that he wanted to have grandchildren who would carry on the red-haired tradition.
That's lovely to hear. And I just want to add one more layer. As I said, Israeli society is deeply reflected in this desire to create life. And here in Israel, we are lucky to have socialized medicine. And for those who are in distress in terms of fertility, the system, the health system supports 2 births, supports financially and in all ways 2 live births with any couple, or I believe also single women who are trying to raise children. And that is just another reason to make aliyah. I'm sorry, I always throw these out in addition to our weather and the hummus. So Diana, do you have anything else you'd like to add on this?
Well, I think what is important is what the professor stressed about sperm retrieval, that there needs to be some kind of national policy about this, because each case now is being decided by the court and by one judge who's saying, yes, it's clear that the deceased wanted to have children, or the partner remembering that the deceased said that. So there needs to be some kind of policy set in place, and also for people when they go into the army, that they do freeze their sperm if they want, and that they do sign some kind of will. It is our reality, and I think the emphasis should be on creating life. And Iris, whose mother also, Bella, was a Holocaust survivor, she pointed out that the 3 H's, Hitler, Hezbollah, and Hamas, tried to kill the Jews, and here now she's given a chance after something so tragic to create new life. And I'd like to stress that also.
Diana, thank you so much for bringing these stories to us today.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks for listening to today's Daily Briefing. Please check out another installment tomorrow. This episode was produced by Ari Schlacht. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until tomorrow, shalom.